Today, we're talking with Steve, one of our clients, and we're going to talk about things like why rapid growth doesn't equal success, why body checking staff out of the way isn't a training strategy, how to get the right people who want to work for you, as well as why hiring the right people comes down to a process, not an interview, and how deselection is more important than selection. Also, we're going to talk about how power in your business comes from knowing your numbers, why a bad lease will destroy a good business, why you should always do your due diligence before buying any business, including franchises, and finally, the best way to form a partnership to make sure you're successful on both sides. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Greg.
And this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast,
where we provide the tools for more profit and less stress in your business now so you can turn into a valuable asset later. Welcome to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. I'm Greg Forzani here with Dennis Takama. Our guest today is Steve Armstead. He has a great story about a business he owned. Actually did a really good job turning around, sold for a profit. Awesome story. We want to get into that today, how they did it, what they did, and then talk a little bit about his business today, which they're just starting up. It's a cleaning company in Greater Vancouver called Livin Clean, which curious to hear how you came up with the name. Yeah. So Steve, we'll get into the old business in a minute, but tell us about your new business. So cleaning business, what geography do you cover, etc.?
So Livin Clean is our company name. The geography started out as North and West Vancouver, and it kind of morphed into, we've done jobs out at Maple Ridge, as far as Coquitlam in Vancouver. So it kind of started in where we wanted to keep our territory close to where our home was, but it actually expanded into, as jobs came up, it expanded into different areas of Vancouver. The name of the company came up mostly from, my wife is very good at figuring out colors and different things that kind of relate to each other. And Livin Clean was meant to be a name that could expand from cleaning into other areas, such as getting into like closet organization, helping people basically take care of clutter, possibly maybe into nutrition, but that was like way down the line. So we came up with the name so that we could expand from cleaning.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us the story about your previous business. It was franchise, right?
It was a franchise, and how it came about. So I had a business partner. He was amazing. And he actually came back from a trip abroad. He was in Costa Rica and he saw a bunch of these little carts on the sides. They were making fresh juice pretty much every turn he went. And when he came back, him and I and another friend got together, and he was telling us about all these juice carts on the street. And he was like, this is a great idea. Like, we should do something like this. And a few months previous to that, we didn't know, but our third friend said, hey, there's a franchise that actually just opened up. Why don't you go and talk to them and see what it's all about? And that's actually where it really started. And then we went down the steps and process from interviewing with them, discussing locations with them, and trying to figure out how to actually get into this. So we went down the road of all the steps we had to take, and finally, we ended up in North Vancouver with our first location, basically. So that was a short version of the evolution of how it kind of started.
So you had the idea, do this, then you looked for something that was already fairly established or something that would give you the systems and processes to start off a lot easier, decided to go that route versus starting your own thing, kind of like more of the quote unquote shortcut to kind of get to where you want it to be.
The evolution wasn't that concrete. It was more, yes, we ended up in that realm because at the end we thought, yes, that would be a lot easier. They already have the system in place. Let's just go with that and follow it, because it would be hard to compete with them. But that's kind of what we thought. They're already established. It'd be super hard to compete. And it's not 30 degrees here all the time where we could just roll a hot dog cart out and start making juice.
I think a lot of people probably have that same thought process, right? Like you're saying, you don't want to compete with the person that's already established, but also, how do we figure it out? They have the proven system. Let's buy their system, right? Which will supposedly ensure our success, for lack of better words.
Yeah, that's as young as we were, we weren't thinking that evolved in it, but yes, like it was basically like, it seems to be like a working model. It's like, we grew up in a cold town, and if it was succeeding in that town, it will probably succeed somewhere else that has better weather. And that's kind of where
So
the evolution came from.
wait a minute. So you guys decided where to live based on starting that business?
So how it worked is you went to them and they kind of said, "Hey, where would you like to end up? Where do you see some of these stores popping up?" And we gave a few options. And all those options actually had stores popping up, or they had potential franchisees that were actually going to take those locations. And they actually ended up proposing a location to us, which ended up being in North Vancouver, funny enough.
Oh, wow.
And it was a blessing in disguise because it was such a great market for it.
I didn't realize you guys moved there because of the business. I thought you already lived there and opened the business. Wow.
Yeah, funny enough, when it came down to it, it was who's going to move, like who's going to go down there and start it, and it just ended up being me, just because my partner had a full-time job, and it was a good job at the time, and it wasn't feasible for him to move at that time, even though he was like the idea behind it and the one that really propelled it forward. It was more feasible for me to move at that time.
Wow.
It's a big commitment
Okay,
right
now-
there.
It
Yeah.
was. It's better to make that commitment young.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah, for sure. Okay, how many years in total? I think we worked together for like 4 years. Is that right?
I was thinking 5.
5. So how many years before we started working together did you own it?
So we sold in 2016. We had been in business since 2003. So yeah, we were a good 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point you had 4 locations, as I recall, right?
It ended up 5.
5?
Yeah.
The one in the university there was a 5th?
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, so how was before, so we started in 2011 working together. Before that, because I think this is cool. It's a really good turnaround story. So it'd be great if we spent most of our time talking about what you did to turn the business around. But again, a little bit of backstory. Between 2003 2011, what was business like? Like what was going on?
So let's do it in a couple of different parts. Let's do 2003 to 2008, because from 2003 to 2008, a couple of things were happening. The franchisor was actually like fairly good at that time, where there was some meetings happening, there was listening happening, there was like some sort of momentous progress, I would say. And it was a new enough concept that we had kind of gained in the realm of like 5 to 10% sales every year upon year upon year, up until about 2007ish 2008, and then we took a big hit in 2008, just based on economy wise. You know, when that happens, people kind of stick to their main purchases, and not a lot of people buy, expensive drinks. Yeah, exactly. Right. And then at that point we had expanded. We were making progress, but expansion costs money, and we didn't have deep pockets at the time. We were just kind of building, and we were kind of going with the building process. My business partner moved down almost right away. When we opened our second location is when he moved down, just prior to that actually. And so we were running it together and working a lot. Like we were putting in, 12-hour days. And then
7 days a week. I know when we met, you were working 7 days a week. Yeah.
Yeah. So when 2008 hit, that was when we had to make like some hard decisions. That's when we kind of got rid of a few of our staff, and we actually worked open to close, and him and I would trade on and off, and we would do long days. And at that time was kind of when the franchisor was turning into I don't know, I like to call it a recluse from his franchisees, because maybe it got a little bit bigger, and their whole model at that point was selling franchises that, instead of building upon what was essentially a great idea. It was even a great foundation for product as well. It just never progressed.
I gotta say, man, that sorry, before you continue, that story's so common. Like it's just I'm gonna try and do this without swearing. It blows my mind that so many franchisors get so focused on selling to new franchisees that they don't realize, like, if they made existing franchisees really profitable, then existing franchisees would do two things. they'd buy more locations because they work, and they'd tell their friends, like, you should go do this. This is great. But when they don't do that, then you don't buy more locations. You don't tell your friends. And then the third thing that happens is potential new franchisees call you, and then you try and be nice and go, well, it's okay. But you don't sit there and go, you got to buy one right now, because you just sort of skirt the subject and don't really answer the questions. And like, it's so counterproductive that they don't spend more energy and time helping franchisees succeed. It just blows my mind.
To like go on that point, it got to the point where, because we were very honest with people, we got to know lots of people, and people would come to us and ask that exact question. Hey, well, and we would say that exact verbiage. Well, yeah, like it's great to a point, but like there's, like you said, there's no added help. There's no progress. There's no change some things, try some things, move forward. It's that, that was big. In the latter half, we would tell everybody that. Like, do you want to spend $350,000 on getting this, or do you want to go and put it somewhere else?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a pretty easy decision for me.
I know. Sorry, I want you to keep telling your story, but to validate that, I know when you went to open so you sold that business, which we're going to talk about, but when you went to open the new one, I was like, so you thinking about a franchise? You're like, hell no. It's not, I don't even think I got the words out of my mouth. You're like, no, not happening.
It's funny is both of us, like my business partner and I, like, we will never again, unless it's something like, okay, there are very few franchises that are there for their franchisees, and to your point, you help your franchisee, you help your franchise. That's just kind of how it works. But like the Browns restaurant, chain, their model is, I want to turn every single one of my franchisees into a millionaire. That is a great model, because when you do that, you succeed.
That sounds like rocket science. Like, how'd they think of that?
Right? Yeah, difficult. So difficult.
Okay, sorry, go back to the story. Keep going.
So, and then kind of at that point, I would think it was 2010, a friend of ours who lived in Calgary at the time, he does commercial insurance, and he actually phoned us and said, hey, I was at this conference, and here's the contact for a guy I think you guys might be interested in speaking to. And it happened to be you, Greg. And then I think we called you when you were still in Alberta. And then you said, hey, I'm moving out to Vancouver, and let's meet. And I think that was the time when we had our first sit down, when you actually came out to Vancouver.
I remember, because I went to Vancouver for like a week to look for a place to live. Right. And on that trip we met down at Granville Island, right?
Yes.
In that little kind of cafe restaurant in the corner. Yeah, I remember that. Like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great timing, like really good timing, because we were just out of steam, struggling. We were trying to look for, and the only thing that we kind of knew what to do was just work more hours, which was, oh man, it was a slog.
So I guess that's where I get curious. It comes down to, you bought a franchise, maybe multiple locations at this point, can't remember. But then someone said something to you at a conference. Like, where do you go from, well, I'm getting no help here, it's not working, we've been doing this for so long, how's somebody else going to be able to help me build this thing? Like, what even made you want to reach out versus just like, it's just not going to work? Because
the guy who reached out to us and said that is one of our best buddies. Like, we all grew up together. And when he said that to us, we're like, okay, let's try this. Let's just at least entertain it, right? And because, to your point, Dennis, they weren't helping. They were just saying, well, hey, let's put a little extra percentage into the marketing fee, or let's do this. And we were like, yeah, we already pay a ton in marketing. Because
the current marketing's working so good. Let's put more into it.
You want a couple more billboards up? All right, go ahead.
So from the business side, friends like, hey, go reach out. You're like, yeah, what do we have to lose? You went and had the conversation.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, that's what sparked it. And because he's such a good buddy, that's what really just led us to, hey, let's just at least sit down and hear what he has to say.
And then from there, what made you make the decision to go and actually use the program?
I think Greg was convincing enough in the first couple of visits, and when we sat down, we said, look, like, if we don't do something, something's going to give, and we might lose this last 10 years of what we have done if we don't at least try something. And so when my business partner and I were talking back and forth, we thought, like, because I think our first sit down was probably an hour, and we went through a bunch of stuff. Yeah, like through your presentation, and we kind of said like, this sounds pretty good. Let's at least attempt it, and then see where it goes from there. And then so we did it. We signed up, and yeah.
And at that time, I mean, just think, for any business owner listening to this, at that time you were into this for, if you had 5 locations, like you're into this for close to $1.5 million, right?
Oh yeah.
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 Because each location's whatever, 300 grand.
Oh yeah, and we weren't paying for them from profit. So we were going and doing what we could to secure funding to open those locations. It wasn't like number one was a gold pot, and which it ended up being really good, but where, hey, let's take this profit and go and open up another one, and then just scale from there. It just didn't work that way.
So why would you keep buying more locations then?
Why would we keep doing it? Well, we were young, Dennis, and we, at that time, we actually purchased another location when we were with Greg, and we figured that, so there's a bit to the story. We don't want somebody else coming in our territory to take away sales from us. So that was a part of our thinking. And funny enough, like we paid a lawyer quite a bit of money to negotiate on our behalf before our first one, because they didn't have a clause in there that said, you get this big territory. It was small. And so we put a clause in there to say we have 2 or 3 years to have this massive 10-mile territory so that nobody else could come in. And then after that was up, they said, hey, we have a location. And it was at the Lonsdale Key. Like it was super close to where our first location was. And so it wasn't necessarily fear of missing out. It was more like, if somebody else goes in there, that's going to take away half our sales. And half of our sales is not, it's not like you're going from $1 million in sales down to 750. You're going like much less than that, and half of it. That was kind of like our frame of mind. Yeah, that's kind of where it went from there.
So if someone else is going to make those sales, it might as well be you.
It may as well be us. Yeah. In hindsight.
Being
2020.
Right. But that's always the way it is, right? I think there's a lot of people that will aggressively expand something out of hope that it's going to make a difference down the road. And so like I often say, like, there's only 2 things that really grow fast and they never end well, and one of them's cancer. So it's like you have that, if I move fast, I take over more, I go quicker, it's obviously going to solve my problem. And I just want to make people aware that wasn't the case at all. More wasn't better, is what I'm hearing you say.
So if we had our decision to buy the second one, if we had hindsight, I would have flat out said no.
Right.
And to our credit, we researched that place a lot. We went in, we talked to the leasing manager there. We sat down and watched traffic. We looked at bus schedules. Like it was a hub. Just, we didn't have enough experience to know that place was like a transit type of area. People weren't coming there and hanging out like they do now, but they do now because there's, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 high rises in the area, and it's like a little major city. But at the time, we didn't know enough to look past the amount of people that were there and what the actual quality and kind of people that are there. And we found out pretty fast that people were just moving through.
I remember that spot. So what you're saying is, so people should learn from this lesson is, it was busy, but everybody was moving. Nobody was stopping and spending time right there.
That's right.
Where today they stop and spend time.
It was transitory.
Yeah, exactly.
And, thinking about, because we had an idea of how much we wanted to spend on a lease. And in hindsight, looking at that space now, we looked at the numbers of the lease and we said, oh, there's a large amount of people in here. This actually equates pretty well. And this actually translates to probably the story of when we were getting out, like later in this podcast. We'll talk about how that actually helped us with figuring out our numbers for a lease of another store. But yeah, at the time that second spot set us back like 5 years.
So translation is, even doing everything right, you did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Really, yeah.
You were looking at all the metrics and you missed one
probably
key
experience. Yeah.
And maybe the lesson there is, you guys did a lot of research, you planned, thought of everything you could, but the one key piece missing was the financial metrics.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense.
No,
okay,
absolutely.
so I got to talk about one of our first meetings. We were at JJ Bean, right?
JJ
That was the name
Bean.
of the coffee shop. So I'll never forget this because I still share this story with clients today. How I remember you guys came in, Blake was running late, is like, and he's just like smoke coming out his ears. And it's like, what's going on? He's like, lots of F bombs. He's like, staff. And I'm like, what's going on? He says, basically, I'm like, he's like, they're screwing up, whatever. I'm like, what do you do when they're screwing up? He's like, and I'll never forget this. I body check him out of the way and do it myself. It's just like, I was like, okay, we need to talk about some things. Change a plan.
It's
That's
so
only
funny.
going to work so long.
Yeah, that can't work forever.
No.
Blake body checking people, one of our first. I got to tell you, like, Blake was the true entrepreneur in this partnership, and our personalities worked very well together.
Blake was a screaming high D.
Oh yeah, and like multiple things. Like he, to this day, I don't know anybody that does as many things as he does over the course of a day in and day out. You know, like running multiple things all the time. It's. I tell him, I'm like, it's incredible. Like I can't do that. But he's like the idea guy, always moving forward. And then I was more of the, hey, let's tone it down a little bit. Let's do some operations. Let's set some things in place. But yeah, like incredible partnership that way. Yeah, he's a true entrepreneur, always thinking of ideas, always something new. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so then let's talk through what are some of the things, because at that time, like obviously staff was not ideal at the time because he was body checking them out of the way to do it himself. Going back in time, what are some of the things we implemented to turn that over? Because you guys actually turned that over pretty quickly, right?
We turned it over fast.
Yeah. So so anyway, tell us what you did and tell us in a way that helps people listening to this believe it's possible. Cause in their mind, they're like, oh, no, my situation's different. Steve's was easy. Mine's really hard to fix.
So staff was one of them. And then numbers were the second one. Like we wanted to get a better hiring process because we did the typical thing. You take resumes and you look them over. You have a 20-minute meeting with one person and then you make a judgment call. Sometimes we would make a judgment call over the counter. We kind of like shot from the hip sometimes like that. And
wait, you have a driver's license? You know where we're located. Okay, you're hired. Can you start tomorrow? Okay, good.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if we liked somebody over the counter, we said, look, we're hiring. Why don't you come back tomorrow? We'll start training you. That type of thing. But you had introduced us to maybe like a different system of hiring people that actually turned out to be a process that, funny enough, Blake uses to this day. Yeah. And we used from that point on, we didn't hire anybody without using that process because it worked so well. Which at the time, at the beginning, we kind of looked at each other like, what are we doing? Like is this really going to work? Like, this is weird, but only weird because we had only experienced the typical hiring stuff. You know, you get a resume, you call somebody, you have a meeting and you kind of go from there. But, the process that we implemented was a great one that transitioned into our staff doing hiring for us at that time because we had put those processes in place really well after doing it probably 4 or 5 times, which you encouraged us to run it all the time. You said, hey, like maybe not once a month, but maybe run it once a quarter, maybe run it every 2 months or something like that. So you can actually get into the groove of doing it properly. And it worked out really well. It worked out awesome. So we started off with the disc and vac. Funny enough, like we did the disc and the vac, we did it for both of us. And then we implemented that for new staff members. And then we came up with a list of questions that we were going to ask based on your recommendations of very specific questions. And we also figured out some team building things that new people that were wanting a job didn't know what we were doing at the time, which that was the part where they were like, God, this is so weird, but worked very well.
You're underplaying it, man. You guys fought it.
Yeah, we did.
They're just like, this is stupid.
So for anybody listening, funny enough, we went in to do the very first one because Greg said, hey, look, I'll come with you guys. We'll do the very first one. Let's get the room, and I will just be an observer in the back, but we'll like kind of coach you through it. And it was, you're doing something new. You have, forget how many people we had, 5, 6,
No, there was like,
maybe
I
even a little
remember
more.
this. Yeah, I remember this vividly. There was something like 11 or 13 people. It was double digit. And we were in a construction zone in the mall. Remember, you got the area in
We
the
were in an
construction
open
zone in
room
the
that
mall.
was like that.
Yeah, totally. But I think you guys ended up at the end. It was like, okay, which one? And you guys were like, no, there's like 5 of them we want. We'll get rid of bad staff and replace them with these good staff. And that was probably the big eye opener. Like, okay, boom, this is going to work.
Yeah, it was a funny scenario going from, okay, we're gonna have, this many people in front of us, and we're gonna put all this on to get one person. But most of the time, we actually found more than 2 or 3 people that were qualified to do it, and that was the first eye opener to just doing a different process, and then seeing it work, and then actually putting it in place and doing it regardless of whether we were going to hire somebody or not. And it evolved too. It evolved into.
Sorry, I was going to say, I can't think of a single client who we put on our hiring process who was like gung-ho about it the first time. They're all like, you guys are crazy. Like, this isn't going to work. Why would you even do it this way? Are you stupid? Like, they have, and I had one client who ran it on purpose just to prove me wrong. Like, and he went in there and I watched him because I supervised the whole thing, like what Greg did. And his effort was a 2 out of a 10. And he sabotaged the entire thing his entire time. He's like, okay, we're going to set this up because this guy in the back told me to. We're going to, and he's flipping through his little PowerPoint chart. He's like, I'm not going to do this. Yeah, this is stupid. And I'm like, just do the thing. And you discovered if you just do it, even not perfect, but do it properly, it works. He did it. He completely blew it up. And he blamed me for it at the end of the day. That didn't work. But
That is funny.
I can't think of very many clients who actually try it with an effort who don't come away going, I'm never going back to the old process of hiring ever again.
Yeah. And like I said, Blake uses that process to this day. Tons of time. Like, just think about the 20-minute conversations you'd have to have with somebody that you never chose. It saved us hours. And then, in the beginning, because we were putting the process in place, it took some time. But then once it was in place, we handed it off to our staff who were more than happy to do it because it was something new, exciting for them to learn. And then eventually it was our staff that was hiring staff. And it actually made sense because they could follow a process that worked and they were the ones picking who was going to work with them. So it wasn't us figuring out.
So they had a vested interest to make sure they hired the right people. And they succeeded. So now they'll step up and help train them because they're accountable that, well, I picked that person, they better succeed. So I better make sure they're trained.
That's
awesome.
Right. Yeah. And the program evolved. Like, we added more steps to it after that first time, that first go around. We added things to make it very difficult for people to be able to hire. Like we would do a test. We would do like things that they just wouldn't know. To your credit, Greg, you said have people jump through hoops. I think after that first time or two, we added the phone call. I think it was it was
eVoice.
eVoice. It was that phone service system that and then we made up business cards and we would hand it to, because people would come up to the counter all the time.
Right.
And they would say, hey, are you hiring? Here's the business card, phone the number on the back, listen to the questions, and just, give us your answer. And
there's a good idea.
It was a great idea because it was simple. I didn't take a resume at that time. And it was your suggestion to do that because that's a hoop. And then if somebody wasn't willing to actually do that, we don't want them anyways. So that phone call, which evolved into it, was awesome because we could listen to the messages at night. It took no time at all. We could listen to them on the computer because it had that software capability. And then we could change the question on there constantly. Yeah. And it was a great screening process that way that we implemented as well. Yeah, that was great.
Cool. What are some other things you did for culture? Because I know, and again, this is a great turnaround story because you got retail stores, you had 5 of them, basically all minimum wage employees for the most part, right? Mostly all part-timers because you're not going to have a lot of full-timers. So you're talking part-timers, young, minimum wage. It's the perfect recipe for super high staff turnover, tons of staff issues. And you did the hiring process. What are the things that you implement? Because you ended up with a team of people that stayed longer because you were telling us from the pre-podcast call, like they stayed longer, they were happy to be there. Like, what are some other things you did to create that culture? Because that's almost impossible to create in that situation.
Just to add to that, we had people that went through university 4 or 5 years, paid their way through university, working there part-time. Well, didn't necessarily pay their way, but helped.
Right.
And once they got degrees, they stuck around because they loved it so much. And I think going back to that hiring process, it started there so that we could hire the right people. They became friends. Like they didn't all know each other
Right.
beforehand. They started really like working together because of some of the systems we put in place as well. We started putting in checklists. And not to say that the franchisor didn't have stuff like that. Like they had a booklet. Let me go in front of here, like that thick, but it wasn't specific. Like it was just how do you run the franchise, but it wasn't specific to how we were running it at that time. And then when we started implementing checklists, we started doing monthly staff meetings. We started, and when we did the first one, we did the first one, the second one, and then we had staff that we had hired from our hiring process over time start to run the meetings. And then
Nice.
so like starting a culture of people moving into positions where they had more responsibility, they felt better. And at those staff meetings, we implemented a certain thing where we would go around the group and we would ask them, what is one idea that you have from the last month that we could implement today that would help this business? We did things like that. And the staff just liked working in an environment like that. And we treated them like our family. Like that was another part of the culture that they loved. And then over the course of time, they didn't want to leave, funny enough.
Which is a good
Great.
problem to have. Like, I think there's a lot of structure. Like, a lot of people complain, well, it's impossible to find good people anymore. Nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody. And there's this big ego thing from the top level. And you're saying, well, we flipped it. We gave the staff the responsibility. We gave them the systems to follow. And in turn, they got to build up the friendships and the circles and the culture. And they wanted more responsibility. And I'm sure some of the positions came with more pay, but probably most of them were just the same wage.
And like, to your point, Dennis, it came with more pay, but not much. Like we're not talking somebody earning, $50,000 and getting bumped up to 75. Like we're talking, like you said, Greg, it was we paid a little more than minimum wage to start, and then it just kind of like incrementally went up from there. The wage wasn't why they were there. It was like you said, it was the culture that was built through. I can't say anything other than like the processes that were in place. I honestly think that because it was not that it was so structured, but I think they liked it. I think they liked that there was things in place. It wasn't shoot from the hip. Like there's a lot of businesses out there that say that they're structured and they have certain things in place, but then when you go to train, they don't have anything in place. Like our training program that we built together, and it was intense. Like you're training for probably 2 weeks, whereas like when I went to training as a franchisee, it was a week. Like, come on, So things like that, I think, lent to people being very excited to be there. We let their personalities play as well. Like we weren't strict on things that I think that young people would not like in a work environment.
And you made them, it sounds like you made them it was more like hey, we want you to succeed. We want you to feel like you're contributing to this company succeeding, feeling good about what you do. So winning, right? People want to win. So you made it so they feel like they're going to win, and you supported them in doing that by giving them the training, the program, the processes, the checklist, the whatever it was. You gave them all that stuff to allow them to succeed and win. And that's deep down, people want to feel like check marks, right? People want to feel like they're getting stuff done and succeeding and accomplishments. And then that's why they want to stay. And then I'm assuming they probably are all to their friends, like, oh my gosh, you got to come work here. And here's why.
It actually happened. It happened like that numerous times where, people that have been there 3, 4, 5 years had said, hey, I have a friend. We're all in the same friend group. And you can kind of establish that if you guys are all friends, then yeah, you have the personality to be here, but you still got to go through the hiring process.
Yeah, right.
And funny enough is
go to that obstacle course
yeah,
over there.
That's right. That's right. And the friends would want to do that. Yeah. We'll get them through the hiring process and we'll do the whole process through, and then it ended up working out.
Well, the whole thing's very counterintuitive, right? Like people assume it's not going to work that way, but you created barriers of resistance, as you said, the obstacle course. But when everybody goes to the same obstacle course, it also breeds this level of camaraderie because we've all been through the same thing. We've all done the same steps. And then your 2 weeks of intensive training, you can find out pretty quick. I'm going to assume within the first couple of days, if someone's going to even survive those those 2 weeks of training within the first couple of days. And it's another way for them to deselect themselves. And there's so many people that will go, well, it's too much work to put together, Steve. Like, I'd rather just have them come on, throw them to the wolves, let them figure it out as they go. Why isn't that way better than what you did?
Yeah. And we did that. We did that early on. And it just, yes, sometimes you would find a diamond in the rough, but it just, you'd be body checking people out of place,
Yeah, it's really cool.
And, once we got to that point where we were dialed in on that training and the new hirees came in and we were doing, like, new hirees would come in and Blake or I, or even one of the other staff members would be with them the whole time. Like we weren't bringing them on to be like, I need an extra body because, I'm too busy. It was no. We are having an extra person on and we're one-on-one with you. We're working through everything together. And I honestly think that new staff members really enjoyed that because at that time when we were training people, it was fast paced. There was lots of people coming in and out. It was loud. And I think they really, really took to that. So they wanted to do a better job is kind of how I saw it. So the one-on-one training where we were 100% focused on them and not partly with them and say, oh, I got to go help this person and then back and forth. That really helped, the one-on-one.
They probably felt like you were vested in them to help them succeed. Therefore, they wanted to reciprocate, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how I felt.
Cool.
There's an epidemic no one's talking about. And right now, that epidemic is the fact that 90 to 95% of businesses are failing. And I want you to think about that for a second. That means 9 out of 10 people who start a business or buy a business go out of business. So now, if you're a business coach, or maybe you're even thinking about a career change and you want to start business coaching, there's something you need to know. Most business coaches think their biggest problem is getting clients, and they're wrong. Their biggest challenge is keeping clients. And you want to know what keeps clients? Financial results. Not breakthroughs, not clarity sessions, not feel-good kumbaya stuff, but cold, hard cash. And here's the proof. You see, we track the cumulative results across every single client in our program, and 94% of the people using our curriculum pay themselves a fair market salary as well as a very healthy net profit. That's 94% of them. And we're fighting this epidemic, and we want your help to make a real difference in small business success around the world. That's why we're licensing our proven curriculum to coaches, mentors like you, and advisors who actually want to get their clients paid. If you're interested in learning more, you can just simply click the link below.
Okay, so you remember the whole checklist thing. In fact, I still use the story with clients all the time. So I use your story with clients all the time for 2 reasons. One, I think you literally did the best job of any business I've worked with on attacking the checklist playbook, like that whole thing. Like you guys, I think in 90 days, you built a better playbook than your franchisor built, and you did it in 90 days.
I agree with you.
And yeah, like it was incredible. Like every little, like even I remember by the till, you had a little thing that said, when you're ringing the, like on one side of the till, it was like, when you're ringing the transaction, do these 3 things. And on the other side of the till, a little to the right, was when you hand the smoothie to the customer, do these like 1 or 2 things. And one of them was like, hand it to them, hold on a bit, give them a smile, look them in the eye and say, hey, please taste it because we want to make sure you like it, right? Like that's a really cool thing. Yeah. So you had checklists everywhere, like for everything, which was amazing. And 2 things I'll say. One, in your staff meetings, you got the staff to help you create them as part of the agenda in the staff meetings, which was awesome. And it allowed you to get them done in like, so in other words, get your staff to help you create the playbook, right? And you got them done in like 90 days. And it was awesome. So there's my compliment of like best job ever creating checklists. The funny part was I remember meeting you guys and you were so proud to show me the first versions of the checklist because they were so cool. They were dialed. They were awesome, but they were laminated. And I just remember looking at them, and Blake took it a little to heart when I was like, these are awesome, but you're going to make changes like every second day. And you just wasted your money laminating them. You should have put them in plastic sleeves. And I just remember his face. He was just like it just like deflated his whole thing of, man.
With an F-bomb.
Yeah, with an F-bomb. Like, fuck.
It's funny.
So I share both those stories. I'm like, this is how you create a playbook and checklist fast in your company. Do what they did. Second part of the story, don't laminate them.
Because you will change them.
Because you will change them.
That's so funny. That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good segue to go to a comment you made a minute ago. So you guys went from working 7 days a week, like 12, 15, 18 hours a day. I remember that when we met. And I don't think it took, I think it took less than a year to get, or maybe a year at the worst, to get down to both of you, as I recall, were working 4 days a week. And I even think towards the end, I feel like Blake was spending time up north and you guys were almost doing like week on, week off thing as partners.
Well, that was probably closer to the end of when we were selling, because we had already been down that road, and he had another path that he wanted to go on, and he was pursuing that as well. But that was like
before
near
it
the
sold.
near the end. Well, but that was near the end.
Yeah.
So
it was for sale. But so you went from 7 days to 4 days
within a year, I think.
15, 18 hours a day to like normal work shifts. I remember that because I know you were able to spend a lot of time with your daughter.
And my son at the time, because he was busy at the time playing sports. So it was easier with our staffing levels at that time.
Okay, so then that allowed you to dive in more and more and more of the numbers, and the locations were all becoming profitable. And the whole time the goal was you wanted to sell the business, right? You wanted to make all locations profitable, be able to sell it all for as much money as you could get. So then we got more into the numbers, lots of stuff to do. And let's talk about, because I think there's an unbelievable learning lesson to be had with the experience you went through with the lease in Park Royal, right?
Yes.
So maybe share a little bit about that, because I think anybody listening to this story, we talk numbers every podcast. And this will be the first time we talk numbers so much about negotiating a lease and the impact it can have.
Can I just add one thing before we get into the leasing, which it just kind of like popped into my head. So before we started the business, we wrote down, 3 or 4 goals of what we wanted to achieve. And never reintroduced them until we got working with you. And then at the 90-day workshops was probably the first time that we had really sat back down and said, okay, what have we achieved from the first time? And then what can we actually reintroduce to actually move forward with the business? Because we weren't thinking about it every 90 days. Like, what have we worked on? What have we made successful? And then what can we actually put down on paper again to work on again? I think those 90-day workshops were phenomenal for us because we got to sit down side by side, not in a work environment, and say, okay, well, what do we want out of this? Where do we want to go? It was, I think that was a good key to that.
And so glad you said that, because what Dennis and I see anyway is so many business owners, they get wrapped up in what they're doing and they don't plan enough. They don't sit down uninterrupted planning. Kind of like Dennis always says, if you're a carpenter, it's measure twice, cut once, right? And we all know that saying. Same thing. 90-day planning is measuring twice before you cut, which is making decisions. I don't mean like cut as in cutting stuff, but just cutting is the execution of like, what decisions am I making and what are going to be most impactful? Yeah. So that's very insightful. You said that, because I think that's something a lot of business owners don't do well enough.
I think it's also after 7 years of running the car on full tilt on less than high quality fuel. You're not even confident it's going to make it around the block anymore at that point until you finally start tuning the engine.
You're pushing it.
Yeah. Then you start getting that engine tuned up and you're actually sitting down going, well, how far could this car actually go? Like, your brain has this reset point of, I'm no longer stressed due to problems. I'm now trying to figure out where the direction to go is. And so you have those 90-day plans to actually sit down and say, okay, now that the car is starting to run, can we actually make it over the mountain versus can we make it to the next town?
Right. Yeah, it's well said, Dennis. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So back to the conversation about the leasing, which kind of segues into us getting better with our numbers and actually using like a proper workbook to actually work through our numbers, what we should actually be looking at, what percentages they should be at, and kind of going from there. So we had a location, at a mall. And at that time, we had been there 6 years, I think, somewhere in that range. And the mall was going through a massive renovation, or like the project was about to start. Part of that project was that stores are going to have to move. We weren't an anchor store, so they're looking at moving stores so that they can start these construction projects.
And we were reconfiguring them all. They were actually moving the food court to a whole nother place,
That's right. That's right. And so, but before that had happened, we were on the outside, which we chose because we wanted to have more control over our hours. If we're inside, you're stuck to mall hours. And if you actually have an outside space still attached to the mall, you can control your hours. You can be open as late as you wanted to. So that was when our original choice came up. It was the lease amount was fairly good. It was still high, but it was the only major mall in the area, so we thought it was appropriate. And then they had moved us into the food court for a period of 2 years. So we knew eventually that when the new food court was being built, we would have to renegotiate our lease. So we moved inside. We stayed at the same rate we were at, which we negotiated as well. And we weren't going to pay any higher rates, even though they wanted us to pay a higher rate, but we were still in a lease and they were moving us. So it wasn't like we were moving ourselves. So we got to stay in that lease. In the next couple of years, which we had worked pretty closely with you, Greg, and doing every 90-day workshop, going once a month. We were working on our numbers quite diligently because that was not a strong suit of ours, is to know what our variable expenses are, what our fixed expenses are, what our percentages should be. How do we get our cost of goods down? What is our gross margin? We had an idea, but we weren't super deep into it where we were cutting like a percent here and a percent there. And, what can we do to get those numbers better?
Sorry, I'm going to divert for a sec just to add to what you just said, because it even got to a point where your franchisor had a set menu,
Yes.
which meant set pricing, which meant your gross margins were set. And your way around that, because of doing the due diligence you just talked about, was, well, we could make our own kind of special blends or flavors, right? Like, manager's choice or staff's choice or whatever, right? A whole menu. And you got to set your own pricing on those, and you had to set the ingredients. You made ones that tasted great, but you made ones where the margins were higher. And then you pushed them with the staff, and then that increased your margins on the product, on the smoothies, because you set higher margins than the company had. And I think you said in the pre-podcast call, the franchisor adopted some of those.
Eventually, yes, nationwide. But
higher margins.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
And so, like, back to your point, when we actually started looking at the numbers, I think we took 2 weeks and we figured out how much our costs were right down to the scoop of
Remember that?
everything.
You're measuring. I remember that.
And
you're
we
putting
also,
this many oats in and this much strawberry
Yes,
and this much.
yeah.
What's the cost of goods?
And
Yeah,
how
totally.
much does that cost? And we figured out at that time what our highest margin sales were and what our lowest margin sales were, and we did that with our staff. So that was another culture thing where
cool.
we included them in it to right down to a blade of spinach. So like,
and now they're bought in to sell the ones that they helped you figure out are the most profitable.
and they were also key instruments into coming up with one of their own. So what we did when we figured out all of our costs, we said, each one of you make something up and we're going to put 10 or 12 of them on the board. And
there's a challenge for staff. Pick one that tastes good, but also is high margin.
Exactly. So we did a lot of
awesome.
experimenting. They did a lot of experimenting, but they felt included in the process. Funny, one of the staff members knew I had a friend, very good artist. And so when we first put this out, we just got a whiteboard and we pay the artist to put on the names on a board. We set the
I
prices.
remember that.
Now we didn't change pricing different than what the franchisor had set, only because we kind of wanted to stay within the guidelines, and we also didn't want to make it difficult at the till. So when you
Right.
go to the till, we just said, hey, this specific name correlates with this drink. So then we would just,
Right.
we would type it in as that, and then it would make it a lot easier for our staff to type it in. Those items got so popular that we went to a printing company and said, hey, this is what we need. We need a board this big, and we need you to use these graphics and print it out. And we actually
Nice.
fixed it on the wall right behind
Nice.
our till. And staff were totally on board with it because they were part of the process. So knowing the numbers because of the exercises that we went through, staff knowing the numbers because of the exercise we went through, they were able to create mixes. We were able to create mixes. And when our head office got wind of it, because, they make their rounds every once in a while,
Right.
they said, what's that? And we said, well, it's just our, staff drinks. Stores have staff drinks or staff picks and whatever all the time.
But there's a poster.
Yeah. So we got a phone call 2 weeks later saying, you guys can't do that. You got to take those down. And then I told them the numbers that we were doing with it. And then they backed off. They said, oh, can you actually send that to me? And so, yeah, we sent them the numbers. I think we were selling 30% of those.
Oh, wow.
30% of our sales were coming from that.
That's going to make your staff feel really good, man.
Absolutely. Our staff was just, and they would push them. It was, and not push them to the point of,
Obnoxious.
Obnoxious.
No.
It was an easy sell. They were healthy. So we made them for our area. We made them super healthy, super tasty, and with good margins. It just made sense.
I think what I like about that is it goes back down to the original reason why you guys got into the franchise to begin with. Blake was down and he saw smoothie stuff on the side of the road and thought this would be a great idea. And now your staff are making up their own recipes and kind of following the initial vision, even inside the franchise model.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
No,
cool.
it was cool. And it was bold because,
Yeah.
it wasn't within, our contract, but because we knew our numbers, because we could tell them we knew our numbers, and we said, look, we're not bringing in ingredients that we don't already have on hand. So our turnover is faster as well. It just made sense. That's what the original evolution should have been. And eventually they took 3 of those and put them nationwide.
Okay, so back to the lease.
Back to the lease. Yeah, sorry. Back to the lease.
No, all good. It's a good story.
I mean, it's got to be pretty cool as a
Oh, there you
staff
go.
member, knowing that the drink that I came up with for you is now everywhere. When you kind of go somewhere, it'd be a pretty cool feeling as that staff member.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily want to sit here and knock the franchise because it's still around. I don't think they've grown as much as they did in that first 10 to 15 years. And I'll tell you, they haven't changed much. So,
But that's a lot of businesses, though. They sit back and they get complacent. It's just a standard process for a lot of companies. They don't keep pushing once they get to a certain point.
right. Yeah.
That's
so
when they should get out.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So okay, back to the leasing. We had moved inside at this point, and we knew we had about 2 years. So we knew we had to renegotiate. We knew it was upcoming. So we put together, with the help of your spreadsheet, we put together a bunch of different scenarios. We had put down our last 10 years of financials, what our progress had been sales wise, everything down to the minute details. And then at the bottom, we basically had, I think 10 different scenarios, and each of them was a different leasing scenario. How much this lease is, how much this lease will be, how much this lease will be. And so we were prepared to sit down and discuss the leasing. And so when the first phone call came, the first phone call was not with the leasing agent of the mall. It was with our own franchise. So we had met with the head leasing agent. We had met with a new guy that came on board when we were discussing the pre-podcast. A fairly wealthy businessman from a different country had come on board to do that specific job, to be a leasing agent. We sat down with them
for the mall or for the mall?
for
right?
the franchise.
For the franchise. Okay.
And so we had sat down to do this first initial conversation, and Blake and I had discussed it. We said, let's just hear them out, see what they have to say, and then we'll talk after. And so we listened to them for, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes, talk about the different things that are happening at the mall, all the people it's going to bring. And it's such a great opportunity. And then here's the number. We were like, are you serious? Like, you're serious right now? Like and within all seriousness, they were presenting it as in, this is a great opportunity. And both Blake and I are like, you're out to lunch. If you think that number is going to work and like you're doing this as a full-time job, that was ridiculous. And then at that point, we said, here, let's bring out our spreadsheet. Let's discuss the numbers. And we went over scenarios of, even
and the guy's like, I quit. I shouldn't have taken this job. The first franchisee I'm working with is raking me over the coal.
Yeah, exactly. And funny, like we even went to the point of where we said, even if we were to increase our sales by 100%, this number still doesn't work. We don't understand where you guys are getting this number from. And we probably had another 20-minute conversation of showing them, here's the progress we've made over the past, 5 or 6 years. I don't see how you think with doing the same thing that we are going to make that number work. And then we showed them like how fast we were going to be bankrupt. We said, if we take this lease on, this is what's going to happen. And so we basically presented them with the spreadsheet. They took a look at the numbers, and I think we had 2 or 3 more conversations before the CEO came on board. And we had
a big company. Like, it's like 1,000 or 1,200 locations, right?
Oh yeah, it's
in 2 countries.
Yeah, 2 countries, multiple countries actually, international.
Okay.
Yeah, and
so the CEO came down to talk like of the franchise or of the mall?
To talk to us and the mall.
Who
the franchise?
The franchise CEO.
The CEO of the franchise.
So a multinational franchise CEO says, I got somebody here in Vancouver who's causing enough of a stink. I better go and have a conversation. That's kind of incredible.
Yeah. And it made me think that they wanted that location pretty bad.
Yeah, they must have.
And we were presenting evidence to them that it just didn't work. They were presenting a number that was twice as much as we were paying right now at that time. Twice as much. Oh, and we said to them, like, do you think we're going to double our sales just by going in there? You're out to lunch. And we even presented them. We said, look, this lease number you're presenting us, I could see it being in a mall that gathers from an area that is 1 million people. Like, maybe. Like, this is a destination. You're getting that many people in. The turnover is incredible. Yeah, sure. I can see that. But this is not a destination place. It is small in comparison to the major malls in the greater area. Yeah. We actually even said that to the leasing agent at the mall, because we went to talk to them. We say, like, you really think that this place is as destination wide as, say, this place
Metro
out in
Town or whatever.
Yeah, Metro Town. Like, your numbers are comparable to Metro Town, and you are getting a quarter of the people. Like, how do you justify that? It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. So, but the fact that we had our numbers in place and everything fully dialed in on that spreadsheet is kind of what saved us in that negotiation. Oh, for sure. And we did not back down. We said, this is like, you guys are going to lose.
Because you knew it was right.
That's right.
Well, 2 things. I mean, number one, they hope to get you on the emotional hype of a possibility of a location. Right. So like so if you hadn't known the numbers, you may have given into the hype and gone anyway, but you did the math. But my other question was going to be a slightly different, which was, were they willing to cover the cost of your move from the one location to the other location? Because I have to imagine that was playing into a factor too. Because you got to tear your one section down. That costs a lot of money. You got to rebuild it somewhere else. That costs a lot of money. Who's going to cover that cost?
That was supposed to be us as well.
Well, so they want you to double your rent, plus you have to move locations because they're forcing you to, and you got to cover.
That's right. But it's a great opportunity. It's a privilege.
Fantastic opportunity. We'll sign you a 10-year lease right now. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, it was, but it was a great lesson in like being prepared. Mm-hmm. And being prepared enough that we knew we were standing our ground. Like you said, Dennis, if we weren't as prepared, like, maybe we would have given in to that possibility. maybe
Well,
not.
I'd have to imagine from your first part of your story, you probably would have, because your first part of your story was, we got to get these locations because it's within a certain radius and we don't want anybody else to take our sales.
Yeah.
So if you would have still been in that mindset, I have a feeling you would have said yes, because you would have fallen into the whole temptation of, well, we can't lose this to somebody else who might take our sales. Now you're looking at it from a different perspective of, I do this, I see the numbers, I'm bankrupt, I don't care about losing the sales. Like, it's a completely different mindset shift.
That's right.
That's huge.
Yeah. It was huge.
So fast forward, CEO comes down, you guys have another meeting, like fast forward, how's the story finish?
So basically, it finishes by him doing his own negotiating, because his head leasing guy and this other guy, like, he took them off of doing
wow.
it, which is pretty funny. So he did his own negotiating, and he negotiated us like a similar number for the first couple of years, which gave us the opportunity to actually work into selling the company. So that's actually how it transitioned into us wanting to really pull the trigger and get out of the franchise. And we knew that if we didn't have a lease in place, that would be one more location that we couldn't sell. Yeah.
And then I mean, basically, so you guys had closed one of the 5 locations, right? So you sold 4?
We ended up selling 3. So one of the locations we were running for the head franchise, and they had closed that one down. The other one that we had, yes,
forgot about that. That's right.
So the other one that we had, we made the hard decision to close it, because
that I remember. Yeah,
that's a whole other discussion. Talk about leasing.
But again, sorry, go ahead, and then I'll add what I was going to say.
All I was going to say is that 4th location, it could have done fairly well if, again, we kind of got duped on actual plans that were in place. Like, we looked at the plans for development up there, and it was a great plan. There was tons of buildings being built. Within I think we were up there for 2 or 3 years, I think 3 years, which we supplemented the whole time, basically. They had a leasing agent that left every 4 months.
Wow.
Because of the same reason. There was a plan in place, and for whatever reason, all of the businesses up there, we would get together once a month. We would talk to the leasing agent that was there, and we were hammering them with hard questions, like, what is going on with this? And so they turned over leasing agents every 4 months for 3 years. It was crazy. Yeah, that place never developed.
So there's another learning lesson of the turnaround right there. You had 4 locations that you owned. One's a money suck, like it's losing money, it's not working. And I think a lot of companies would say, well, as a group, like as a collective, it's making money, right? Without diving in and saying, hey, the tough decision is that one location's not making money. We don't see the possibility of making money. Because I remember crunching numbers on that with you guys, and it was just like, to get it to a point where it's profitable was just unachievable. The numbers were too high. It wasn't going to happen. So it was like time to cut the cord. And that's a hard decision, right? That's a super hard decision, because you guys invested money to open that.
Yeah.
So
we invested profit that we had into that
exactly.
store.
And then the math is, do we close it and stop losing this much every year, or keep it open, hoping one day we'll get our investment back, which you weren't going to, because you were going to lose more each year. And it wasn't a little bit you were losing, it was a lot you were losing.
It was quite a bit. We were supplementing quite a bit.
That's a hard decision. So, I guess you lived it. I know it was a while ago, so it's not really fresh on the mind. The pain's not fresh on the mind. But what would you say to people in that kind of situation? Like, they gotta, like, what advice would you give on that?
Honestly, I would have closed it sooner. That is the exact advice. If we were doing it again, and I was looking at the numbers, and we were going through the same situation where we were asking hard questions and not getting very good answers, and we were seeing turnover, I honestly would have cut the cord much faster if I were to do it again. Now, the hard part was, we had signed a lease, but the easy part was that their leasing agents were leaving every 4 months. And so it was quite easy to negotiate getting out of there. It wasn't difficult because of all the stuff that was happening up there, with all the businesses being they're in the same boat, asking the same questions. But yeah, I would have cut it way sooner.
And as I recall, you were able to, like, you didn't lose all the investment because you were able to sell a bunch of the assets, right? I think a few of them you took to the new location.
We actually did. Yeah. We kept a bunch of the assets as either replacements or additionals, and we upgraded some of the stuff because that was all new inventory of assets that we had. So we upgraded a bunch of stuff. So yeah, we didn't lose out in that respect, but man, the ego took a hit hard. You know, like you just don't like it sucks failing. Like that was a hard one to discuss and do.
But was it a failure?
Well, we learned a lot from it, actually. Funny enough. Yeah, we learned a ton. So at the time it felt like a failure, but thinking back to it, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from it, for sure.
And you started making more money.
That's right.
And you were able to focus on, so because that location that wasn't working, so anybody can relate to this. Anybody listening to this, part of their business is failing. That's where you go spend all your time. And if it's not working, you keep spending more time. Now you're neglecting the part that is working. So for you guys, I know in that 5 years we worked together, whatever, like things just kept going like this.
That's right.
And getting out of that location allowed you to focus more on the ones that were profitable and to make them more profitable, right? Which then led to you be able to sell the company for you're able to sell it for a decent chunk of money. Like it was a profitable sale.
Yeah, that's right. It was a profitable sale. And like you said, it allowed us to stop the bleeding from the other stores and reinvest that money actually into better stuff, better marketing.
Yeah.
Going and doing a few more programs that actually helped us through different times as well, because that business was fairly cyclical, you know, and we were able to implement a few programs that helped it through those times as well. Yeah, which solidified the sale because we could spend more time on thinking about how we were going to do that.
Well, on the one side, I could see where it would feel like a failure because, of course, you expanded, now you're contracting. On the other side, it's kind of like you've had a sore back your entire life, and then suddenly the sore back is gone, and you realize how much you missed out on because now suddenly the back is feeling so much better, and you're back to playing sports and back to doing the stuff that you love to do. But just making that choice to make the change would have been hard. And I don't think you would have been able to make that change had you not known the numbers as intimately as you do to see where the money's actually going. It would have just been one big giant circle of cash, and we have a hole, but you wouldn't have seen the hole.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a hard ego decision, but at the same time, I got to imagine that once it was actually all said and done, the emotional relief was probably palpable because you could actually, like Chris does, as Greg said, dial in onto what was important.
Yeah, you're so right on that. Yeah, 100%. And Dennis, I love your analogies. The sore back and then getting rid of the back pain is a great visual because everybody knows what a sore back is. And then when it's gone, you don't know what you didn't have. And, beyond that, that was great.
Okay, I know we're getting to the end of the podcast. Tell us, going to sell the business. Was it easy to attract buyers? I know it was a while ago, so it's going to be hard to remember, but was it easy to attract buyers? Were they interested? I know what we experience now is when we listen to clients selling their businesses, it's easy to get somebody interested because the businesses are profitable versus most are not profitable. So people aren't interested in not profitable businesses for the most part. So how'd you find was it easy to get interest level? What'd that go like? Was it hard to negotiate? Talk us through that.
I can't recall where we put the business for sale on. I can't recall that, but I do know that Blake and I had a pretty good conversation. So Blake was a big driver in getting potential buyers just because that's just it's his personality. And we actually had a really good conversation about we see 100 to 200 people a day. What is the big deal about talking to people that we know have money and just talk about what our plan is, and that was a big driver of finding a few potential buyers that way. I know we also, I can't remember whether we put it on a website somewhere or a site of some sort. I'm pretty sure we did, but at the same time, it wasn't necessarily simple. It was simple. It just wasn't easy finding qualified buyers. We probably met with a dozen, maybe 14 or 15 people over the course of a year and a half before we found somebody that wanted to take all three of them. We had potential buyers that wanted one or the other.
Right. Package deal.
Yeah, totally. And we said, this is going to be a package deal. We have to do a package deal. And honestly, it just took some persistence and time. And Blake was super persistent about it. I commend him for that. It was a lot of just communicating, talking to people, finding out who would be interested in owning a business. Because we had lots of people talk to us about buying the business over the course of the 15 years that we were there. That part wasn't a problem. It was that we were doing it now and we needed to find those people now.
Right.
The fact that we actually had our, going back to numbers, we had everything in place so that when we were courting people to buy the stores, they would ask very specific questions. We'd have the answer for them right away. I think
sorry,
they like
I
that.
gotta add to that. That is so freaking important because we have friends here in Phoenix that are looking at buying a business, and I've been kind of helping them out with it. And it's been like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 months, and they still haven't got all the proper numbers. Like the seller's like scrambling around. I'm now exaggerating, but they're going through garbage cans and looking under rocks for paperwork, right? to get it to the buyer. And it's like, that's how you lose buyers. And by
Right.
the way, what a great way to lower the confidence of the buyer.
Absolutely. I'll get back to you on this one.
So having all that stuff like bang, bang, bang raises confidence and gets them at the moment while they're emotionally heightened about buying.
I think it piqued a lot of their interest right away, which led to us sitting down with them again. And most of those didn't pan out. Some of them had certain questions on expenses and cost of goods and can you deviate from what the franchise does? Can you do certain things this way? And a lot of it came down to that. And then when we eventually found the buyer who wanted to buy all three, it ended up being somebody that just had a ton of money that wanted to buy something for his sister to run. And it ended up being that, funny enough. But through the process of talking to so many people, putting it out there, discussing it with the right people, and having our numbers in place was ultimately what led to not a simple sell, but like a simple sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure the same guy who bought from you, if he had met Steve and Blake back before the whole thing and you guys are running 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, probably wouldn't have been all that excited about writing a check for all the locations to say to his sister, hey, you get to work this many hours a day, this many days a week, and there's only one of you. So try to double it to make sure that you can keep up with
and
the
the
workload.
staff only stay for 2 weeks and then they quit.
Doesn't that sound great?
Yeah. And you got to body check them out of the way sometimes because they're not selling the juice the way they're supposed to.
That's funny. A true Canadian would like that, but
also, it also tells me how much of a unicorn it was that you sold it this way, because what we're talking about is the way most people buy a business isn't buying something like what you created with those locations. They're buying that shoebox full of paperwork and hoping the person's got enough together, where you had the system, but I also have to believe you had the profit and the patience to wait for the right buyer because you weren't in a panic sell situation. It was, we could keep it or we could let it go, but we're not panicking tomorrow to get it to the first guy who comes along with a check.
Yeah. It was a bit of in between that as for like we wanted to get out before the new lease kind of like started up, but yeah, we had time and we were prepared and it just ended up working out that way, funny enough. And we gave the buyer everything that we pretty much created. Like we said, hey, look, if you run it like this, it will run on its own. Trust me. And within 5 months, all of our staff had left. Like within 5 months, because they just didn't take that to heart. Like, we had many conversations with them. Said, look, the franchisor has a way of doing things. We have upgraded. We have put a lot of things in place. Here are the books. Just follow them. That's all you have to do. And yeah, I got phone calls from staff saying, I can't do this anymore. It's just not the same. And to this day, I see people in my area that some of them still go, some of them don't. Most of them came back to me and said, it's just not the same. It just isn't. And it's funny. It's just, you build up a system like that, thanks to you, Greg, and it just, somebody doesn't follow it. All you have to do is follow it. You don't even have to build it.
It's funny how that works, right?
Weird.
And you think with that big of an investment, because it was a big investment, like a big investment, you think they would want to do that.
It was odd. It
now,
was odd.
I wonder if, I don't know, we won't know the answer to this question, but I wonder if that was not a franchise and you had built that business and showed that system and sold it, would they have followed it? Versus because it was a franchise, did they, for whatever reason, kind of default to, oh, we'll just follow what the franchise says, which wasn't working very great, right? You got to wonder if that was the thought process. I don't know.
It's quite possible. They still had to go for their week of training. They still had to go through the franchisor to have training. It's in the contract. So possibly at that point, they said, here's all the material, use this, instead of taking our word for it for the past bunch of years. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we probably won't ever know.
No.
And
Do I
I
want
think
to?
there's people that get caught up in this myth of if I buy something like that, it's passive and I don't have to babysit it. I can just let it go and I just make the money. Like there's an illusion that that's a big thing out there too. But you guys brought a level of passion to it. You put in a lot of the reps. You did a lot of the heavy lifting that it would still take somebody buying it to intentionally pursue those systems for a period of time to get the same habits in place. And that has to be a want to. You can't just buy something and cash in every day. It doesn't work that way. But I think too many people assume it does.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like it's
Especially
not an unusual story.
No, and especially for something that small, like you don't have general managers in place that have been running that system that you can continue on running that system, but you still have to interject yourself. You still have to be there to make sure that it's all being followed.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't.
You got to care about it.
Yeah, that too.
So what made you transition after selling that into cleaning? Why not just retire and hang up your skates?
Yeah, I didn't make that much money, Dennis.
Well, that's what people are going to wonder, right? Like you had the locations, you sold the locations. There's this mentality out there that most people who sell a business must make millions and millions of dollars. That's why they sold it, right? I just want to break illusions that are out there. So like you played the game for 15 years. You decided to be out of that game. And then you, like you said, you didn't make there was enough money to hang up the skates and retire. So what made you get into something completely different? Why not just go and pursue something similar?
Okay. So number one, I never want to get into a franchise again. Franchises are too restrictive. And if you actually know some things, like what Greg taught us, you could run something way better than running into a system, unless that franchise has it absolutely dialed. And very few do, from what I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very few. From what we see too.
Yeah. They're more interested in selling locations, which is such a funny model. Like it's just a weird model to me. Just
it's
doesn't
actually
make any sense.
Shame on those people, because if you're selling franchises, you've got to get enough financials to have enough wherewithal to know the franchisees are not succeeding. Like they have to know that.
Oh, yeah.
And to just continue to make number one priority to sell franchises without making the current ones profitable is
nuts.
Well, they're bad people.
Yeah.
They're bad people.
Yeah.
And they can't plead ignorance because they know. They look at the numbers. They know. I can't obviously prove this, but I've seen enough franchise organizations to know, and talk to enough franchisees to know, that literally over 75 or 80% or 90% of them, actually probably 90% of franchise organizations, their average franchisee is probably just breaking even. Average franchisee. I know they have some they'll point to and go, oh, well, they're a rock star. They're making all this money. Yeah, great. What's the average one do?
Absolutely.
And for them to sit there and watch those numbers and still sell those franchises is so bad. So bad.
Yeah, it really, it should bug people. If they're not working on getting their bottom franchisees up to where they're making, a quality profit, 15% profit after paying yourself a wage, that should be the average. But like you said.
And then they'll sell more because they got.
That's right.
It comes with it. It's just. Yeah, but I think the big issue is they actually don't know how to do that.
Yeah, probably not.
They don't know how to. Yeah.
Well, and the model's based off of averages. If I've got an average location that pays me 7% of their total revenue and I can multiply that by multiple locations, I make that percentage overall. I'm trying to create pennies in every location instead of dollars. That's the model. If I can sit at the top of that, I make good money. What do I care if I chew through people at the bottom, because I still get my 7%. 8%, 12%, whatever that number is. I don't care who's there. I don't care if you sign a bad lease, Steve. All I care about is that you have the revenue to pay my royalty every month. And I will pat you on the back and I will tell you some good things and I'll make you believe certain things. And if you leave, I'll just, kick you out and give it to the next guy, or I'll take it over myself until the next guy comes in. That's the majority of franchise models I've seen that are out there. very few ever
And the
take the time.
franchisors make good money. Like a lot of them make really good money. And yeah, like you're saying, they just don't give a crap. It's brutal. And what they don't realize is the destruction it causes. Like these franchisees will second mortgage their house or use their retirement investment or inheritance or I don't know, whatever. It's or a family where dual income, they'll quit one job and use the money, and then it puts stress on the other one. And then you start losing money. Now that money the other one's making can't float the house because they're losing money at the franchise business. Like it's sideways. It's
almost a Ponzi scheme.
It is. Yeah. So like, I think what Dennis and I see a lot of, and Steve, I think you've done enough due diligence because you made a decision not to buy another franchise, that I firmly believe what happens with a lot of them, not all, because there's some amazing ones, like amazing franchises, but a lot of them, they come up with a concept. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. And the founder's really good at that product or service. And a lot of them are products, right? But they're great at the product or service, like great smoothie or great sandwiches or burgers, or they're a great plumber or whatever it is. And they do a great job. And their friends and customers are like, wow, you're so good at this. You should franchise it. And they're like, ego kicks in. Of course I should franchise it because look how great I am at this. And then they go franchise it. And as you can attest to, and you said today, just because you're great at your product or service does not make you a great business owner. It's a totally different skill set you have to learn. So they go do that and they don't have the skill set to make it profitable. So now it's like, okay, they got this thing that's not working, not profitable. They franchise, sorry, I should back up. They're great at their product or service. Someone says, open a business. They open a business. They don't succeed at it because they're not a good business operator. And then someone says, well, you should franchise it because you're not making money as yourself. Go franchise it. So they franchise it and sell the dream because the product or service is so yummy or great. And then nobody knows how to make money at it. And they just keep selling them and they get their 6, 7, 8, 9 points. And it's like, wow, look how great I'm doing now. And I'm doing really well. I'm selling all these franchises. Look how much money I'm making. All of you, the franchisees, you're all screw ups. You don't know how to make money. But they're following my system, like they're following the system of the franchisor that doesn't exist or is shitty. It's just this crazy. And I'm telling you, I don't know the number, but oh man, from my experience, that's got to be minimum 75 to 90% of franchises. Minimum. It's absolutely corrupt.
And there's no
unethical.
standards other than a good franchise lawyer for starting a franchise. Like there's no there's no barrier to entry. I can go grab an idea without ever launching a product and go straight to a franchise lawyer and do up a contract and go sell somebody into a franchise. I think that's part of the challenge of the whole franchise industry is there is zero due diligence or barrier to entry to even get to the point of signing the contract or building the contract. It's just, yeah, I ran 10 miles the other day, so I'm going to start a running 10 miles franchise. You should buy mine. Right? And pay me 5 to 12% of your revenue. And they don't take into consideration nuance of location. Yeah. Like downtown Vancouver is going to be completely different than Millet, Alberta, which is going to be completely different than Ottawa. Like they do a blanket system that's not necessarily applicable everywhere. And you discovered that by having to create a lot of your own stuff inside the franchise. Yeah. Pro is applicable to you.
That's funny. We had that conversation that you just talked about, Dennis, with them quite often. When we said that, we like we live in a different place here than you do in Saskatchewan, than you do in Manitoba, or out east. Like, why don't you do a few things a little bit differently, and you might see some benefit from it?
Yeah, or just actually try to figure out how to help us be profitable.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
like without saying, "Oh, it's on you." Yeah. We sold 1,200 locations, so we're doing really good. Yeah. It's your fault. Your 4 locations aren't doing.
That's right. Plain and simple.
And then don't worry. Revenue solves all your problems. Just go sell
them. Yeah.
Or a new location.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that'll help.
That should solve it.
It'll give you more presence in the area.
Yeah.
And don't worry about the rent.
I just need more presence through a new location. That's all I got to do. Yeah. And don't worry about the rent. Look at the beautiful marble floor. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry. You're spending a lot of money, but it's worth it.
Right.
So then we were touching on, you decided to go into Livin Clean because it wasn't a franchise. So what made you decide to go to the cleaning industry and away from that altogether?
Funny enough, like I'd had a few conversations with my wife and her sister as well. And we were discussing businesses basically, and cleaning came up at her work. They have cleaners that are there. I've known a few cleaners. We've known a few cleaners. And then we kind of started looking into the business. And it was a business that was fairly simple to start. And okay, a few things. You don't have to wait for customers to come in a door to sell a product. And at that same time, you're paying somebody to sit there, right? Like the cleaning business was you have a client, you go and clean, you get paid. You got a client, you go and clean, you get paid. So a part of like a lot of what we had discussed with Greg over the years was like staffing. And how do you do this whole thing? And the cleaning business I thought was a great way to not have to sit on product and sit on staff hours before
In other
actually
words,
would make
they
money.
only get paid when they're cleaning.
That's right. I think the numbers in that respect, like the revenue in that respect, worked very well. People these days have a lot of money, especially in our area. With that also comes time. They're obviously putting more time into making money. And so they have less time at home to do the simple things, the simple tasks that we could take off their hands. So cleaning was a big part of that. And the amount of money, like the amount of revenue, like, or the amount of money that you could charge that was relatable in this area made sense to me. And so that's kind of how we transitioned into cleaning. It was more or less, like we talked about a lot of businesses, but number one, didn't want a franchise. Number two, didn't want food. The food and beverage industry, it just did not want that. And then there's other things. There's the construction types. You got electrical, plumbing, construction of houses, siding, anything like that I just didn't really want to get involved in. And then the seasonal stuff. So because we had a seasonal business, I wanted something that wasn't going to be seasonal. And cleaning is always indoors unless you're transitioning to, cleaning cars and cleaning houses and doing like a full package. But, cleaning can be done at any time. Everybody needs cleaning done. And it's not winter, it's not summer, it's not spring, it's all the time. So it kind of transitioned into that because of those things that I experienced over 15 years previous. It kind of transitioned into that. I'm sure there's other businesses out there that translated kind of the same way with the staff, the revenue coming in all the time, the seasonal stuff, but this seemed like a great fit for that.
Well, and
that's the reason why.
It sounds like you took a lot of what you learned to do a different kind of market analysis, figure out what's going on, crunch the numbers, run it, find out what made sense for you versus just jumping into something that felt like a good idea.
Yeah.
Like there are situations of places where cleaning doesn't make any sense, but it sounds like you looked at it from a point of, well, let's look at my area, because you said that a couple of times. Let's look at my area specifically here. What makes sense for where I'm at, and what can I take and apply that I built in the other area in a way that I actually enjoy doing it, not just trying to sell a beverage or be stuck to seasons or be stuck to something. So you took a very different approach to this than you did the juice business.
Yeah, a very different approach. Now, some of that, was experience. We're a little bit older or whatever, but yeah, I actually remember contacting Greg and saying, "Hey, I have this idea, and I'm looking at this business here. What do you think?" And funny enough, he actually talked me out of it, and it was a cleaning business, and we went through the numbers, and he gave me a few different perspectives that I didn't think about. I was only thinking it from the perspective of this is what I don't want, and this actually checks the boxes. But then he established a few different other perspectives, and so I didn't go that route, but still stuck with the actual industry because I thought it was a good industry.
Makes a lot of sense.
Blake's first initial thing that he really wanted to do passionately when he moved up north was farm. Like he's always wanted to own a farm. Yeah. And so that really pushed him to go back up north and pursue that. That's his passion. He loves farming. He loves animals. He loves all that stuff. And then he transitioned into a log home restoration company. So they basically go out and they restore the outsides of log homes, and a landscape company as well.
Cool.
So
yeah.
Go back to what you said before. Blake's the
Three
king
different
of
things at once.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't know anybody else that can do it.
And to add to that, he's got 2 untrainable dogs.
So he's got the Kangles.
He's got to work on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's so funny. Like that guy could just run on no sleep. It's incredible. I got to have my 8 or 9 hours a day. He's just go. Yeah. Always thinking of ideas.
One last thing we didn't discuss, but I think it's kind of important. If anybody out there's looking to form a partnership of some type, because you've obviously had multiple partners. What advice would you give to anybody who's looking at forming a partnership? Because they're not easy.
Yeah, no, and to your testament there, we knew a lot of people that said, "Ooh, you should not get into partnership with one of your best friends. Like that's going to go sideways pretty quick." I think what worked well for us is understanding our weaknesses and looking for somebody that can fill that. I think like my weaknesses, Blake had strengths, and Blake's weaknesses, I had strengths, and we were super open and honest about everything. And I think that meshing of understanding what our weaknesses were so that we could have somebody else take on those with their strengths is what worked really good for our partnership. You know, he was super strong in certain areas and I wasn't, and I was strong in other areas and he wasn't. So I think for anybody getting into a partnership, understand your weaknesses, because then you can find somebody who has those as strengths.
Well, and even the way you're still talking about your business partner, most people in business partnerships, like the end relationships, they don't really want to talk to each other, and it's a fight over the kids. Like, but it sounds like you guys are still actually really good friends, even at the end of the journey, which is hard to find. So good for you guys.
Yeah, I know it worked out really well.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Very
guys.
much appreciated.
A lot
Awesome.
of fun.
Before we go, our producer likes to send us a couple of questions off the cuff and just kind of get some quick, funny answers. Well, funny or not funny answers. So, okay.
Does your dog have a squeaky toy?
My dog does now. Yeah, just came
that's
in here to
funny.
go grab the squeaky toy and decided to run out with it.
It's like so faint in the background, but I know what it sounds like.
That's funny.
Okay. First question. Steve, I'll go to you first. What is your favorite smoothie?
Okay. Favorite smoothie. Oh, gosh. Okay. On my own, I'm not going to name a name that would have been on the board, but personally, I like doing bananas and blueberries. I always need protein, and I don't tend to like juice in them anymore just because I like blander tasting stuff and it's just a little too high in sugar. So I'll either use milk, half water. And then cinnamon. Cinnamon is my number one go-to choice to put in a smoothie. 100%. Makes it so much better.
Good tip.
Yeah, kind of a mix of that. And honey. Throw some honey in there.
Yeah, another good one. Yeah. Like that. Nice. Dennis.
Caramel mocha frappuccino.
Dennis, you're in too good of a shape to have that drink.
I don't get it all the time, but if I got to go get a smoothie, it's generally a caramel mocha frappuccino.
And then especially like to turn it into like a float. You put a scoop ice cream on the top or something.
No. I try to keep some inches off my glutes.
And cut off the top and bottom of a liquor stick and use it as a straw.
I mean, I don't even know if that counts as a smoothie at this point.
That's funny.
That's so funny.
That's funny. I think I've grown to like peanut butter, banana, chocolate. Sometimes I like throwing oats in it. Honey's good. I got to do the cinnamon thing though. That was a good tip.
Add the cinnamon. So good.
Now, what
I like
volume? Like a cinnamon or like a...
Dennis, you pour with your heart, man. You pour with your heart.
I want to start writing that on all my recipes when I make stuff. Just add like your heart.
Yeah, just pour from your heart. Yeah.
That counts for everything but mustard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, question number 2. What's your favorite sport to play, Steve?
That's so...
Don't say like horseshoes or something.
Is that a sport? Is that a sport? Well, because I grew up playing baseball and hockey, I would say seasonally, baseball in the summer, hockey in the winter. I have to.
Good one.
I love all sports though. Like how hard is that? It's so hard. Come on, producer.
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't say like MMA.
Yeah. We did jiu-jitsu for a while, Blake and I, actually. It was funny.
That'll help you get to know your partnership. You can find out how the week's been going right there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Get your finger out of my nose. It's cheating.
That's awesome.
Oh, I know why you broke my arm. I get it. Sorry about last week.
Yeah, exactly. Pent up anger.
So wait, back up. So are you playing baseball seasonally or are you playing slow pitch?
It was baseball until about a year ago. My arm was hurting so bad. I can't play anymore. Yeah.
And how hard were guys throwing?
Like mid 80s, like 80 to 85. Some guys. Yeah.
It's hard if you're not practicing. It's hard to keep up with.
God, it's humbling.
Especially if they can, especially if they can throw stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like if the bottom's falling out of the ball or whatever, it's like if you're not practicing, that's hard to keep up with.
Oh yeah,
that's actually
stupid. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
I would say of all sports, I mean, unless I'm forgetting one, but baseball is probably the hardest to play as you get older because you don't practice, right?
Yeah.
And you look real stupid when The ball's moving around. You can't hit it.
Yeah, hitting's got to be one of the hardest things to do in sport, especially when the ball's coming in fast and moving. It's difficult.
Well, you got to make that call.
I used to love going to the batting cage and cranking up the machine to like 100, and then like it's just like
it's humbling.
Yeah, very.
What about you guys? What's your favorite sport?
Dennis, you.
Well, I'm laughing to myself as you're giving your answer because I know both of you like started at a higher level and graduated to old man level. I'm starting at old man level. Like I cut my teeth on modified slow pitch with the seniors team. Like I've never been anywhere else than playing with the cripples and the lame people who are like, yeah, back in the day when I was, I'm like, when you was, this is the best I've ever been. Like my game's going up and their game's going down. So that's awesome. For the last 10 years, I played on the same modified slow pitch team in Leduc. I've never played any other sport outside of that one. And it's every year we gear up for it. And it's actually been kind of fun because my kids have been part of that since I started. It's what they look forward to every summer. And they come up with all like the cheers and everything else for the team. And now they're like the whole cheering section for the team. And they're excited when I come back to play because they get the cheering section to come with them. And it's been a blast to learn. So yeah, my favorite sport to play is modified slow pitch because of the whole community side of it. Not because of any abject athletic ability. My athletic ability is bench pressing and squatting heavy things. That's about.
Yeah, didn't you used to bodybuild? Like, did you used to like? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Not professionally. Let's not go crazy.
It's
but I was able to keep a good chunk of muscle mass on most of my life. But I got to tell you right now, there is zero correlation between benching 220 and hitting a ball.
Yeah, absolutely zero.
It's great. Awesome. It's great being that guy who's like 220, getting up to the getting up to the plate to go hit it, and everybody's like backing up to the fence, and you just dribble it past second base.
Oh, that's funny.
Actually, the big dudes, once in a while, like flip on like USSSA and stuff like that, like their championships and stuff. And the big dudes now, because there's home run rules, they're actually practicing now, and they're getting really good at like cutting the ball straight into the dirt in front of the plate, so it just kind of dribbles and backspins. Like they're getting really good at it.
Wow!
Like bam, straight into the ground, and it goes about 20 feet and dies.
Yeah,
it's hard.
I'm literally not one of those guys that goes 20 feet and dies just because of my form.
That's good. I love that.
But there's no other game where you can hide enough alcohol in your ball bag that nobody really knows or cares that at that point you suck because you're drunk.
Yeah. So
you've gotten to a really senior level when the bat's hollow and has a screw cap on the end. And that's when it's time.
No, I haven't played with your team yet, so I'm not sure what that's like.
You haven't got the call yet, Dennis?
I'm going to say slow pitch for sure in the summer, although golf is a really close second. Winter, love to ski, haven't done it in a really long time. But my new up-and-coming sport I'm really starting to enjoy, go-karting. That's on the radar now.
Like actual racing go-karts?
Well,
you mean
that would be fun
cards.
to join, but that'd be... No, like... But going go-karting. It's a blast, man.
Love that.
Yeah, super fun. Okay, my man. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a comment or review if you're feeling generous. To learn more about us and what we do, check out our website. Until next time, take care.